So a review of Lakutis Sichas in Chelek Yud Zayin, the second sicha for the Parsha of Kedoshim. So Rashi sicha, which the Rebbe explains the statement of Rabbi Akiva in Pshuto Shel Mikra that Rashi brings down, that when the pasuk says "V'ahavtu l'recha kamocha," it's a klal gadol b'Torah, and explains also the idea that how can you instruct somebody to love, and especially love as kamocha, to such an extent, and especially it seems like to every yid, even a yid who is not fulfilling all the mitzvahs, and yet we're telling him to have an ave. How could you have an ave to such a person? Also explains the two statements. We have general statements about Ahavas Yisrael. You have the statement of Rabbi Akiva that it's a klal gadol b'Torah, which Rashi we're discussing now, and we also have this statement of Hillel, who said that while the ger he wanted to learn the entire Torah while he's standing on one foot, so he told him that Zui kol haTorah kula, what is hateful to you, don't do to your friend, which is similar to the idea of Ahavas Yisrael, as we'll see. And the rest is commentary. So what's the difference between the two statements? The Rebbe will explain at the end of the sicha in the Pnimius Ha'inyonim. Well, let's look inside. We're going to Seder here. Ois Aleph. From Pasuk V'ahavtu l'recha kamocha, on the verse, love thy fellow like yourself. So bring Rashi the Maimer for Rabbi Akiva. Rashi brings the statement, the saying of Rabbi Akiva in Toras Kahanim, that Zeh klal gadol b'Torah, that this is an important rule or a great rule of the Torah. So what is Rashi trying to teach us over here? So Meforshim Zayne Mevayer, so Meforshim explain, as Rabbi Akiva will herausbringen the Größkeit von der Mitzvah, that Rabbi Akiva is trying to bring out the greatness of this mitzvah. The mitzvah V'ahavtu l'recha kamocha, how great it is. This is an Indian clothing on Torah, that this is a general rule of the entire Torah. With the Maimer Hayedu von Hillel, similar to the saying, the known saying of Hillel, what is hateful to you, don't do to your friend. And he said, Zui kol haTorah kula, this is the entire Torah. And the rest is commentary. So this tells us how important this is, all of Torah, says Hillel over there. In a similar way, Rabbi Akiva says, this is a klal gadol b'Torah. Seems to be more like an emotional, a spiritual, a lesson in life. But Rashi's objective, as we know, is to explain the pasuk. What's the problem in the pasuk that Rashi is trying to address over here? She's not just coming to tell us how important mitzvahs are. Dafmen verstehen, Pirush Rashi la Torah is kipshutei. Rashi's commentary on the Torah is as it is obvious. Nita Musar Sefer. It's not a sefer of morals. If some haters I need to awake and encourage Yidden to keep my mitzvahs, to do mitzvahs. Now, Rashi himself has presented the purpose, the rule of the Rashi is Vanile Basi Elo Lipshuto Shel Mikra. That means that the reason I come to explain only the simple meaning of the pasuk. Now, that does not contradict that Rashi has secrets and wondrous insights woven inside the Rashi, but first and foremost, it has to come to tell us the simple meaning of the pasuk. From Pirush Rashi Kennen, we are able to, from Rashi's commentary, since we're able to, so we need to take out wondrous matters in all chelkei Torah, in all sections of Torah. Biz afilu rozin deraisa, even to the secrets, the esoteric parts of Torah, which is Yeina Shel Torah, the wine of Torah. Koilel befrat inyonim hanoigim and hogim poil from yadam. That would include, especially, specifically, those matters which are connected to the act in actuality from yedern, from each one yeder token every day. So ideas like Havas Yisrael and the Klal Godel are very important and they are necessary. But you need to have explanation why Rashi, how it's explained in the literal sense. But to begin with, the main thing, Rashi had every word. The Rashi is important in order to understand the simple meaning of the verse. So based on this, we don't understand what is the Schwierigkeit in Posuk. What is difficult? What is the difficulty in this verse? Because this is being answered with Maimer by saying, so we have a difficulty in the verse that says, and now we're explaining that difficulty by saying that this is a Klal Gadol B'Torah. So what's the difficulty that is being answered with this explanation that this is a Klal Gadol B'Torah? Another issue is Rashi quotes the author of the statement, which is unusual for Rashi. Also, we need to understand, because Rashi is mighty the Shem Bal HaMaimer, that Rashi quotes the author's name, the name of the one who said the statement, Rabbi Akiva. Because Rashi tutus nordan, Rashi only brings down the name of the author when das is moisiv and avonas hapirush, when it adds to understanding the meaning. Figeret filamo, as spoken many times. Everyone wants to know, what does the name that Rashi quotes it, that it was said by Rabbi Akiva, what does that add to Rashi's commentary over here? Rebbe says here there is a expression that says, a good question, but the answer is obvious, it's very simple. Base. As you know, in Oizruf, there's an expression, Hakushia Toiv. The question is good, but this answer is obvious, is simple. So it's in our manner. It says a very simple explanation for this. A good question, but a very simple explanation. Torah tells us over here this mitzvah seems to be the basis for all mitzvahs of the Torah. So why doesn't the Torah just say this mitzvah? And then as a result, we already know that you can't cheat and you can't steal and you can't hurt your friend, all the details, because they're all essentially one result. If you love thy fellow as yourself, then you're not going to do all these things. Rashi wants to tell you, therefore, this is taka the general rule. There are specific mitzvahs. This is basically the rule. When you learn this verse, love thy fellow as yourself, as the avet that the love to another Jew needs to be like yourself, just as you love yourself. So there's immediately a very simple question that is raised. Why do we need separate commands of Geneva, not to steal, Gezela, rob, Loisikoim, not take revenge, etc., etc. The merste mitzvahs, which is most of the mitzvahs that are between man and his fellow. Then means the mitzvah. If you observe the mitzvah of love thy fellow as yourself properly, so automatically you will be careful from doing and be protected from doing anything bad to another yid. Just if you love him like yourself, you're not going to do anything bad to him. Not only that, not only not going to do bad, but you're going to search to do good and kindness with him. And even more, in the Zelber Mos, and you will do it in the same measure because kamoicha, you'll do it the same measure, was man will as for sich allein what you want for yourself kamoicha. So therefore, why do we need to have all the mitzvahs in which all the mitzvahs seems to be included in one mitzvah? So this is answered durchbringen by Rashi explaining as that this is a great rule in the Torah. Was meant the pashtus, what it means simply, is a klal. That's a general. It's a general rule. Was v'yeder klal, just like every rule, contains many specific details. But those these are all the above mentioned instructions. Und therefore stehen in Torah die alle mitzvahs, and that's why all of these mitzvahs are recorded in the Torah, different mitzvahs. Because this is something which is common, we find many times, as der Posuk sagt, seidem klal, und sayich the prot. The Torah will tell us both the general, then the Torah says the details. It's not a question, why does the Torah write the general and then the details? It's a general and there is details. So same thing is over here. Even if the details will be self-understood, yet the Torah writes them out. So the klal of all the mitzvahs is v'ahavta l'reach kamocha. Then we have the specific of all the mitzvahs. But usually when you have a general rule and then you have the mitzvahs, they are all together. Here we have some, all over the Torah we have them. And that's why he says, it's a big one, it encompasses. When is there a rule and specifics that we say separately? And the protiv of no klal, when the details of the general idea are enumerated next to the main, the principle, the rule, the general rule. But in our case, many of these details they are spread out in many places in the Torah. How could this be a cloud from all these other details? How is it fitting to say, as the Alet Sivuim stay in the far, that all of the reasons that the other commands are written they are all details of this general, which is in some other place in the Torah, in a distant place. That becomes the rule for all these details which are scattered all over the Torah. That's why Rashi cautions us and tells us the answer by saying, this is not stama klal. This is not just a general rule, nor a klal godel b'Torah. It's a large rule in the Torah. Those was protim stein b'smiches zum klal is nor ba stam klal. The fact that there's sometimes details that are written next to the general, that's the way it seems to be a klal aprat. If we're talking about a small general rule, is a general rule. Since loving the fellow is a great rule, which has in it many details. Also, some of the details are not merely details, they can be rules over many smaller details. Und das ist bei Torah, klal godel. It's a big klal, which it can include smaller klal. It's also by Torah, meaning in all of Torah, God's Torah. Bazak klal is nit mukhrach in such a rule. We're talking about such a huge rule that encompasses all of the Torah. Is nit mukhrach. It is not. It doesn't have to. Not only unachmer nitshayich. It doesn't apply. You can't really have as alle protim zon stein besmiches zum klal. That all the details should be standing close to the cloud. Okay, so it comes out, a good question, simple answer. This is a cloud for many details, and that's why we have to have all the details, because details are enumerated, even though we have a cloud. And this is a big cloud, and it includes a lot of klolim, includes a lot of mitzvahs all over the Torah, and this becomes their klal. And now we're going to take a little bit of a longer explanation how this is associated after with the Rabbi Akiva, because we have to understand the actual mitzvah. How is it possible? How is it possible, Taka, to love somebody like yourself? And here we're expecting for every person, even a person who is not observing Torah and mitzvahs, and each and everybody, you have to love them, not just love them, you have to love them like yourself. Seems to be a little bit difficult to understand, but when we understand, it goes like Rabbi Akiva, we'll see how this is answered. We have to understand, this is similar to the very well-known question. How does it apply a command? How can we command something which is an emotion in your heart? A mensch is a balabos of seine meisim. A person is in control. He's in charge over what he does. You can tell him, do this, don't do this. You are in charge. You can do as you decide to do. But a feeling in the heart, but not everybody can make a feeling. Here we're talking about the hafta, make of love. Love the other person. I mean, how could you have the love? How is it possible to instruct every Jew? Torah tells every Jew that every Jew has that you should have a love in your heart for another Jew. And not only to any Jew, to some Jews, but to Yederin, which means when we say every Jew, so the Rebbe says at least for Maderach Hapshat, in the literal level, is Re'acha Koil Aliyidin. That would mean all Yidden. All Yidden is V'hafta L'Re'acha Kamech. In the notes of here, the Rebbe has a whole question also according to Halacha, whether the love, some people says you have to hate them, they don't do mitzvahs, but in there also the Rebbe actually comes up that in most it's a mitzvah of actually of Avos Yisrael for every Jew. But at least according to the Pshat, what the Rebbe is learning now, the Rashi, is it's Kol Aliyin. This means love every Jew. Onke Nagdora, there is no defined, you can't define them, you can't categorize them. Every Yid is Re'acha. We're not just telling a person, love every Jew and every Jew, but we tell him what extent of love, like yourself. Not just a love, nor kamecha should be like yourself. How is that possible? How is it possible? The Mefarshim fragen, as the Mefarshim asked, that every Jew should love another fellow just like himself. Ramban, using the language that the Ramban says, this is something which the heart of man, of a human, cannot accept to love his friend like you love yourself. And the other question would also be, Rashi points out that anything that talks about to the heart, which we don't know on the surface, the Torah says, that means it's most. Over here, we don't find that this loving is connected to in your heart, base. And why? This is something which is in your heart. Is Rashi Mefarish. Rashi explains as called over everything that has been presented and given to the person's heart. So over there, the Torah says, you shall fear Hashem. But Derech says that Mefarish come up psukim, and Rashi along those on this idea of Veresim Lekecha explains several times, many times later, which Veresim Lekecha is written in order because it's something which is given over to your heart. If he says Tamua, so according to this, it's surprising. Because when it comes to this mitzvah of loving thy fellows yourself, Bos Aleph, number one, Ava b'chlal is mekure b'lev. So just even in general, talking about love, if we're talking about v'ahavtas Hashem elekecha, it's a matter of love. So love should say v'yireisim elekecha. But especially we're talking about what degree of love. We're talking about a very profound level of love. Love kamoicha. That is definitely given over to the heart of man. Over here, we don't find over here that warning. So how do we love somebody? How do we instruct somebody to love? Are you able to love somebody? Why doesn't the Torah say it's a matter of love? And the Rebbe is going to explain that on the contrary. This isn't talking about love and the heart. This is talking about practical. That's the rule, the generality of the practical. And this is associated with Rabbi Akiva. Let's look inside. Dalet. Oh, these shilas, these questions for entered Rashi and Pirush. This question Rashi answers with his commentary. As v'havta l'reich kamoicha is a klal from Protim. I said this is a general. There is details over here. Umaram is the mentor of Kusha Aleph, and Rashi hints the answer on the first question that the Rebbe asked. How could you love somebody? So Rashi brings down the name Rabbi Akiva over here to tell you, to telling you that the name is Rabbi Akiva. So first of all, we know this is a rule of the details. So let's look at the details. The details are very practical. They're not matters of the heart. Aleph, Zaynik HaKlal is verstandig, because this is the general, so we know it's understood. As the Kiyum Bepoil is durch Kiyum HaProtim. How do you fulfill a general? By doing the details. You fulfill the general mitzvah by fulfilling the details. Let's start. We should start with those we just enumerate right before we said what did we say? Don't go around like a peddler, peddling lashon hara from home to home. Don't hate your brother in your heart. Don't take revenge. And before that, starting from there, don't steal. We're talking about very practical things. Is verstandig in was der state. So what does it mean? Love him like yourself. This is what it consists of. In Yonavas of the those we're talking about. I don't mean everything. Those things that you can command. I'm not talking about something in your heart. Love him in your heart like yourself. We're talking about practical things. There's things that the Torah is just talking about. Unesver dort gesagt, but the pasuk says you shall fear God. Is the fun verstandig? So from this we understand as so this idea of yoresa would apply to the other ones by them, which it has to do with the heart. It applies. So this is actually something where there is a tzivui. It applies literally. There's things to do, and since over there it says yoresa melekecha, so wherever it applies, we should apply yoresa melekecha as well. Number two, it's Rabbi Akiva. So the first point here is this is a klal of a prat. And therefore, this klal is talking about and is fulfilled by doing the details. The details are very literal, as enumerated in the pasuk before, and those are things that of there is v'yaresim alakecha, and in those things that necessarily would apply to the klal as well. But number two, Rabbi Akiva held that your life comes before your friend's life. If two people are going in the desert, they only have one jug of water. So if you give it to your friend, you die. If you keep it for yourself, your friend dies. So Rabbi Kiva says, take it for yourself. Why? Your life comes before the friends. But wait a minute. Didn't we say you have to love him like yourself? Why should your life come first? So it turns out, since that's the ruling of Rabbi Kiva, as Lashit is Rabbi Kiva, what means like yourself? Is not gemein gleich mamash. We don't mean exactly like your life. You come first. Your life comes first. So the word kamaycha over here is not to be understood literally as yourself. And it's kamaycha can say, it means like, just like, a chof hadimyon. This is a similar to, likewise. Gleich in a prat. It is like you in one detail. I'm going to bring an example from before, from the Chumash, in which Yehuda was saying to Yosef, before he revealed himself, he wanted to hold back Binyamin. He tells him, he threatened him. He said, Kifare. Also use the word kamoicha, like you like Pare. It doesn't mean you are Pare. It means that in one aspect you are like Pare. Under Pirush in kamoicha, what is the meaning of the word laracha kamoicha? Is azoyal derech hapshat. This means, according to the pshat, doesn't mean mamish like yourself, but it is similar. Pirush in one detail is similar. Pirush Rashi frier kamoicha kapare. What is a kamoicha kapare? Taish Rashi. What does Rashi say? What was Yehuda telling Yosef? He was telling him, Choshev ata beinei kimelech. You are kamoicha, you are like pare to me. So it didn't mean nitas Yosef is pugvi pare. It doesn't mean that Yosef is just like pare. Nor verak benegei zu chashivas beinai. In my eyes, you are important like pare. So we're not talking he's like pare. In my eyes, you have important like pare. So that means kamoicha, meaning similar. So how do we explain this in our case when it says kamoicha? Benegei andere. So no, go back. And in our case, so when we say benegei andere is Yosef Pugdi Pare. So as far as others go, so Yosef is exactly like Pare. So in other words, everybody besides Pare, in my eyes, you are like Pare. But in Pare's eyes, you're not like Pare. Benegeya andere is Yosef Pungvi Pare. As far as others, Yosef is like Pare. Nobody will raise their foot or hand or foot without Yosef, which means Yosef is in charge to a certain degree, which means others, to other people, he takes the place of Pare. But when Pare himself, he says, Akise is Egdalim, I make the throne higher than you. So we see clearly, what does Kamoicha mean? Kamoicha doesn't mean Kifare. What does Kifare? What does Kifare mean? That it means that you are similar to Pare in the degree that we treat you like Pare, but you are not really Pare because Pare is still higher than you. The same thing is similar in our case. If it doesn't touch your life, the Megidam Chayis, your own life, is the Havel Kamoicha, then you're loving him like yourself. Mentut fariyene v'mentut farzich. You do for somebody else to the same extent you do that for yourself. B'shas ober esrit on chayecha. If it's a situation which touches your life, v'derfal, as in the case from Shnaim shoyim malachim baderech, two people were walking on the road. And one of them has the jug of water. If they'll both drink, they'll both die. So therefore, it's only a choice of one. Is chayecha koitmin, l'chayech haverecha. You come first before the other one. So we see. Therefore, what's the question? What was the question? How could you love like yourself? With takanat, it doesn't mean mamish like yourself. You come first, so it's not actually like yourself. So it's not so problematic. How could we say? So first of all, it expresses itself in the halachas. Those are the details of Haftal L'Reacha Kamoicha. And second of all, it's Rabbi Akiva who says that Kamoicha doesn't mean the degree of actually yourself. It means like yourself in one aspect, even though in other aspects, when it comes to a question of your life, you can take precedent. So it's not such a problem. But the Rebbe continues to ask you, and hey, even the level, when we don't come to a situation where there's one jug of water, it's either me or you. In another situation, we expect you to be treating your friend like yourself. That's also seems to be defies the possibilities of a person for everybody to expect that. Hey, this is still not smooth. Let it be, Take. We say that your life comes first. Okay. Aber Kozman is handelt sich nicht in a Fall Basritan Chayecha. But when we're not dealing in a situation that touches your life, is that b'chaylos for yeder yid? Is it then in the capability of every Jew to have such a feeling of love in your heart to yenem to the other person? That should be similar to the love of yourself, which is like yourself. It's also a very strong level. And this is not only to one or some Jews. Unochmer, as the regesh lava kamoicha, this great level of love is l'reacha, is to your friend to yeder in, to every Jew. Kenal siv gimel. Unoich zu einem. Was it ever good on Aver Rachman Islam? It would also be to somebody who violated a sin, God forbid. And Torah Sema Zokta, but after mine is that Torah you have to punish him. And yet you're saying you got to love him like yourself at that degree. How is that possible? And the Rebbe explained this by another statement of Rabbi Akiva, who says that we're all God's children, we're all their brothers. When you remember that the other person is your brother, then you could actually have that love to him. So also this question is answered by a statement of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, Chavivim Yisrael shenikru bonim lamokr. That Yidden are dear, we are called Hashem's children. Bonim lamokr. Umizeh, since we're all children of Hashem, as alle Yidden zwischen sich seinen achim mamish. That all Jews amongst themselves are actual brothers. So if our statement showing, so now we understand already, how could you have a feeling of love to another Yid, to the extent, the profound level of by like yourself? Then when a person will reflect, and you will sense, as the zweiter is einer Bruder, the other one is his brother. That will bring him, arouse him to a feeling of love to him, to the other, like a brotherly love. And the far can the Ave sein zu jeder in. That's why this love can be for every Jew. In whatever situation it may be. Weil alle Eden seinen allemal bonim lamokim, because all Jews are always sons to Hashem. At every level. You can't say there's no Jew that is not called a level of a son. As we see, there was the debate between Rabbi Akiva, to the evil Turnusrupus, and he said to him, how can you feed the poor people, and if Hashem wants to punish them, how are you helping them? And Turnusrupus gave him the example that a king got angry at his son and he punished him, and yet the friend of the king helped out the son during the punishment. the king is going to be very happy. If the king punishes somebody who's not a child, so then if you're going to help the person who's punished, the king will get very upset at that. But since the person who is punishing is his child, so therefore the king is actually very happy for helping his son. And therefore, in this case, we see that even a Yid who's being punished by Hashem still is called a child, and that's why the king is happy. The Eibishter is happy for helping him. Even when Jews are in a situation, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu is v'amelech shekos al b'noi, that Hashem is like a king who got angry on his son. So why are you helping the son? Is anan kruim bronim. We are called children, and this is like the king got angry on his son, not like the king getting angry on a stranger. And therefore, when you help him, so that shows us that we're still called bonim. The Rebbe brings out another issue now. No, is vav. The Rebbe says, why did the Torah wait up till now to tell us the Parshas Kedoshim? And the answer to that is also Rabbi Akiva, because according to Rabbi Akiva, all the Torah was already given in its generalities and the details by Har Sinai. So it means this is a repeat. So it's not a question. The Torah Taka didn't wait. This is just a place where it was repeated. And that's also has to do with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Another hint, another answer for a child that might ask that question by saying that this is Rabbi Akiva. Another inyan Rashi hints they're bringing them Shem Balamayim Rabbi Akiva by bringing the name of the author of the statement, Rabbi Akiva. A Talmud you have a sharp student, he can ask, if loving thy fellow like yourself becomes a major principle of the Torah, an clothing against Torah, this is a general concept in all of Torah. So how come this was only commanded to us in the Parshas Kedoshim? And a stretch of time after the Torah was given, after the raising of the Mishkan. And the answer is no, Rabbi Akiva, because according to Rabbi Akiva, this was already told a long time ago. This was only repeated now. According to Rabbi Akiva, that's not a question. But Zayin Shita is, because his view is, as Klolos Protus Namru Sinai, that both the general and the details have been said by Sinai. Those was steht in unser Parsha, was is Oyel Moyed, and this that it's written in our Parsha, which this was given by the Oyel Moyed, by the 10th meeting, is das Nishnu. Namru Sinai ben Nishnu Oyel Moyed. Kommt ois as behaftel reichel kemoiche shegizog vor Har Sinai. That it was already said the Har Sinai, so it's not like we waited to give us this principle, just that this time is when it was repeated again and it came out over here. And now in the initial Torah, the Rebbe is going to address the two major statements quoted before. Rashi brings down Rabbi Akiva as a klal gadol b'Torah, and also the statement of Hillel, who says that this is the whole Torah is the Lachsan el-Chavle Yisabid, and the rest is only commentary. Zayin. For Yena Shal Torah and the Pirush Rashi. So the wine of Torah in this Rashi. When it gets in mitzvah from Abbas Yisrael, as far as the mitzvah of loving their fellow, seine Yidden, loving a Yid, seine Dotzvei L'shoines, there are two languages. The Gebracht Freer has quoted, has brought before. Aleph, number one, we have the Maimer for Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. That's one statement. This is a major rule or a great principle of the Torah, a general rule, a big rule of the Torah. And based that Maimer Kamadoris Lifnesa, many generations beforehand, there's also the saying from Hillel. From Hillel, Zuhi Kol HaTorah Kula B'Dach Pirusho. This is the entire Torah, the rest is commentary. The Chelek Tzvishen the Tzvei Amorim is Kipash Loshen. So what's the difference between the two sayings? Is when you see the language, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah meant this is a main principle of the Torah means, as Avas Yisrael is a klal in Torah. It's not all of Torah. This is a principle, a main principle. Einer von klolei Torah. This is one. It's amongst the other principles of Torah. It is actually a major rule, but it's not the only rule of the Torah. Aber doch not ein klal. This is still just one rule in Torah. Klal b'Torah und nicht klal ha-Torah. This is a general in the Torah and not the generality of the Torah. Mash enkin Hillel zokt, but what Hillel is saying, Yazuhi kol ha-Torah kulo. He says this is all of the Torah. So to him, this is all of Torah. Is this? This is God's Torah. It's all of Torah. Und idoch is blois pirusha. The rest is only commentary. But all of Torah is madaloch sani. What's hateful to you, don't do to your friend. So the mit is verstandig, was Rashi brings. Now we understand what Rashi brings. Mamorish la Rabbi Akiva davke. He brings specifically the statement of Rabbi Akiva, or not from Hillel, not from Hillel. While in Pshuta shel Mikra, because in the simple meaning of the pasuk is Avas Yisrael nit kol ha-Torah kulam. Love of the fellow is not the main of all of Torah. She's not the cloud from a mitzvah shemerodin lachavera. It's only the rule of the mitzvahs that are interpersonal, between one person and the other one. Over there is the klal gadol of ahavta l'reich kamoich, but it's not the whole Torah, all the other mitzvahs. Because the far zetman, and therefore we see as bepirush Rashi l'shas, that even when Rashi explains it in the Gemara, within Shas, Rashi gives you also the simple approach. Nor pshat limit from Shas. It's the simple according to the style of learning of Gemara, of Shas, not the simple as we learn in Chumash. So over there too is a mefarish, the maimer, the aloch sani, chulu, lechabrich, zuik Torah kol ha-Torah. So how does he explain what is hateful to you? Don't do to your friend. And to say that this is of the whole Torah, we can't say it l'reacha means literally to another yid. Over there, Rashi explains it means to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As those retzich nitbeg mitzvah Yisrael. Rashi is saying that Hillel isn't talking about the mitzvah of loving thy fellow. Nor lechavrich l'sabed. What does Hillel mean? Don't do to your friend. He's talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meint reacha ze HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is talking Hashem as referred to as your friend. Al taver al dvorav. Don't violate his words. Because that's why that's all of Torah. Because that principle is understood, but we don't understand. Rashi in the Gemara cannot explain that Lochsani, this is the principle of loving thy fellow, because that wouldn't be Kol HaTorah Kula, that wouldn't be Idach Pirusho. That's what Rashi explains, that it refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Leuten, zweiten Pirush is Rashi dort. And according to Rashi's second interpretation, this comes after the first commentary. Rashi says, as l'chavroch mean chaveroch mamish, that itaka means your friend, literally. So take as loidem pirush, that according to that pshat, if we're going to say the loch chaver, the loch san l'chavroch, that it means your friend, literally, to another yid, loidem pirush is kol ha-Torah kula lav davke. It doesn't mean taka all Torah. She's not gzeila gneya niyuv v'reiv mitzvahs. It only talks about stealing, robbing, niyuf, and most mitzvahs which are benod l'chavere. So, therefore, the Rebbe explains, Rashi has to bring down Rabbi Akiva. This is a klal gadol. It's not kol ha-Torah kula. Just like in the Gemara over there, it doesn't mean everything. That's what Rashi brings down Rabbi Akiva and Adila. But therefore, we need to understand. Since both the words of Rabbi Akiva, the words of Hillel, are both the words of the living God. Muslim Zogan, so therefore we have to say, as beidel l'shonos v'inyonim zayin emes. They're both true, both languages. The language of Rabbi Akiva says this is only one of the rules of the Torah, and the language of Hillel in the Pirush, that it means all of the Torah. This is the whole Torah, even of the other mitzvahs. This too. And they is and minimally you can explain the in the inner matter of things. Is it verstandig? So we have to really, what we need to understand about as Abbas Yisrael is called Torah Kula. If Abbas Yisrael is really all of the Torah Kula, like Hillel says, Idach Pirusha, that so if it's all the Torah, so what is Rabbi Akiva adding with this idea? This is Blois Klal God Torah is one of the rules of Torah. So in 200 is included 100. So if it's all of the Torah, what are you saying? This is just one part of Torah. Especially that Hillel's statement has been said, mentioned earlier, beforehand. And we're accepting the interpreting Hillel, not like Rashi in the Gemara, but we're accepting Hillel's meaning, that it means that it's the entire Torah, also how, that's part of the subject, but it is part of everything. Why does Rabbi Akiva say that it's only a klal? How do we reconcile all these things to fit them all in together? So the Rebbe is going to explain now in Ois Ches and on by first explaining the Mishnah of Hillel, who says that Oyev Sabriyis, Oyev Sholem, Reidev Sholem, Umakarvan La Torah. What is the connection to Makarvan La Torah, loving the people and bringing them close to Torah? So we have the general idea that you should bring the Torah, bring people up to the Torah, don't bring the Torah down to them. But there seems to be a direct connection that because of Oyev Sholem, V'Reidev Sholem, you should be Mekorvan La Torah. In Bechlal, we know that you have to love every Yid, not only because you're going to bring them to Torah. Let's look inside. Ches. But with those Verstehen Behagdim, we'll understand it by introducing the Maimer von Hillel, the saying of Hillel. Havei mitalmidov shel Aaron, Oyev Sholem v'chulu. Be of the students of Aaron, says Hillel. Loves peace, Oyev Sholem. Reidev Sholem. It says, Oyev es habriyas u'mekarvan la Torah. Love the people and bring them close to Torah. So the question is, what is the shaychus? So what's the connection from Oyev Sholem v'chulu, Oyev es habriyas? What's the connection between loving peace, etc., and loving people? Loving Sholem and loving people. And then we say, Mekarvan la Torah. Loving Sholem and loving people, that's one thing. But why do we say bring them close to Torah? Dafke. Specifically. Avos Yisrael bringt Eden. If you love the other person, that brings the Jew to Zuchen und Zweitens Teva. It brings you to searching, you want to do the favor of the other person. Nicht nur beruchnis, it's not only spiritually, not in all seinen Yonim, in everything that, in all of his matters. Hein begashmis, hein beruchnis, whether it's physically or spiritually. So why does the Mishnah say, if you love Sholem, you love the people, and then bring him close to Torah? Is you do the Hesber, so it's known the explanation. As der mit, Bavon the Mishnah cautions us, as mezon nit machen gibt Sholem Sholem beTorah zu lieb Avos Yisrael. One should not, God forbid, make compromise in the Torah because you love the other fellow, so therefore you're going to compromise. That oyeves habriyas, when you love the people, davzainin and oifen, loving the people needs to be in such a situation for mekarav zayin the briyas to Torah. You want to bring the people close to Torah. But not the other way around. You don't want to bring the Torah to them. So I don't need the Torah to ruach habriyas, to bring the Torah down to the spirit of the creation, to machem pshoris in Torah, by making compromises in Torah. So according to that interpretation, we understand. So we're just cautioning you that love the people, but there's a caution here. But it seems like umekorban la Torah is an expression, part of the oives habriyas. According to this interpretation, it turns out as umekorban la Torah, bringing them closer to it, is blois azaitike bavoranish. This is a side cautioning that in the minyan for oives habriyas, we have the idea love the people, and we're telling you be careful how you love them. Make sure that you bring the Torah, raise them to the Torah, and not bring the Torah to them. From Pasha Losh, nobody's moving, but from the simple language, it's understood as the Mekorban La Torah is a hemshech on atitzoah for Oives Habriyas, that it's a follow-up, it's a result. If you love the people, then Mekorban La Torah. The Avet to the Briyas, the love to the Briyas, bring to the it brings and it expresses itself in them. He brings them close to Torah. This is also evident from the Tanya chapter 32, with the Alter Rebbe bringt the Rob the Minor. Alter Rebbe quotes, brings down this saying of Havei mitamid of Shalarim, be of the students of Arna of Shalom Chulu, Oives Abris u'Mekarvan LaTorah. How does the Alter Rebbe translate bring close to Torah? And touch this up and he translates that. Loimar, that is to tell us, even those that are distant from the Torah of Hashem's Torah and His service, you have to draw them, pull them with thick ropes of love. And perhaps so much if you're pulling, maybe perhaps you will be able to bring them close to Torah and the service of Hashem. This says, as the mekuvan for tzorich lemoshchem mechabelei avesis ava chulu. Now, what is the intent? Why do you have to pull them with the ropes of love? Is lekovan la Torah avedis Hashem, to bring them close to Torah and the service of Hashem. The Alter Rebbe brings down, even if you don't succeed, as is not as perhaps you'll be able to. If you don't, you did not lose the reward. At least you practice the love of the fellow Jew. So you see that what the Alter Rebbe translates it, that Mekarvan LaTorah is a part of pulling them with Ava to Torah. That's the part of Oives Habriyas. You're loving them by pulling them to Torah. Kasha is noch starker. The question is even greater. Lloyd, wie der Alter Rebbe is mevayer dort frier in Perek. For the way the Alter Rebbe explains earlier in the chapter, the meaning von Avos Yisrael, why we need to love the other Jew, it has nothing to do with Torah. It has to do because our souls are fitting. So why is this expressed in pulling them to Torah? As is darf sein mitzad dem. Vos reacha izayid. Why do we need to love? Because when we say reacha, a Jew is after reacha. Reacha, a yid is considered your reacha. Unhot neshama, and has a soul. Every yid, those kulam, all these souls masimis, they all fit. There's one Father to all of us. That's why all yid are called actual brothers, is because we all fit. When the Fardav the Avazayin the Kol Nefesh Yisrael, that's why the love needs to be for every Jewish soul, whether they're great or small. Biz Beloshna Magid, until the extent the love, as the Magid says, you got to love a complete evil just like a complete tzaddik. So we see that the love is to the neshama because the essence of who they are, whether Rosh or tzaddik. So why are we expressing it in Mekarvan LaTorah? Havibal as the Ava, since the love is nit mitzad Yerem's matziv and Avedis Hashem, is not based on the standing of the other person in service of Hashem, not an Ava mitzad neshama, but rather it's an essential love that is from the soul. So why should that love be connected with the fact that why you should bring them to Torah? So the Rebbe now in this test is going to bring out that there's two levels in a Yid. There is a Yid the way he is above, and the way a Yid is higher in Torah, but then there is the way a Yid needs to be in this world. And these are the two expressions. The expression where this is the whole Torah, which is above Torah, or it's a part of Torah. Let's look inside test. They're beer in them. Explanation of this. As is Yedua was Chazal Zogen. It's known that our sages of blessed memory say, as Machshavtum shel Yisrael Kodma l'chol davar, that the Jewish thought comes before everything. Which means the thought about Yidden, the creation, in Hashem's preference, what comes first? It's the Yidden, before anything else. They even come before Torah. As Yisrael seinen fried, that the Yidden are before, they're also higher in Torah. But on the other hand, that's on one hand. But in the Zohar it says, as Yisrael miskasher be'iraisa, the Yidden connect to the Torah, be'iraisa b'kutchabricha, and the Torah connects to Hashem. But from them is mashma. Over here it appears as Torah is hecher from Yisrael. The Torah is higher from Yidden, and the Yid has to connect to Hashem through the Torah. State of them the Biur, so the Biur is explained on this. It's written about this. Those was Yidden sein hecher from Torah is as b'shosha. This that the Yid are higher in Torah, that's the root of Yid. But the way they descend below is Torah hecher from Yisrael. Torah is higher than the Yid. Und die Iskashrus von Neshama Kutshem Brichu is durch Torah. In this world, in Lamato, how do we connect to Kutshem Brichu? We need the Torah. The far sein adot zweik, so is the kinyonim in Ayid. Therefore, we have two extreme levels by a Yid. Mitzad them was b'shoyder sein Neshama Yisrael hecher from Torah. From the prospect that in the root that the Yid are higher in Torah, is Yisrael Yisrael a Yid, even as though he's sin, he's still a Yid. It doesn't matter. As many sins that a Yid should commit, God forbid, he does not become a non-Jew, God forbid. Well, these kashrus from the Etzah and the Neshama von Ayidin zum Eibishter, because that tie of the essence of the soul of a Yid to Hashem is not abhängig in seiner Aved and Torah mitzvahs. That does not hinge on his service of Torah mitzvahs. But those gufa bring to them, that alone brings us to this, as jeder Id is bevaydai soifer losses tshuva. At the end, every Yid will do tshuva. Kehrt sich zu Torah mitzvahs. That he will go back to Torah mitzvahs. Warum wie bald as these kashrus von Ayidin do lamata zum Obersten is durch Torah. Because since the tie from a Yid below is to Hashem is through Torah, is the Maila Atzmis was Yisrael, so that Maila essential essence advantage that you are Jewish cannot bleiben als a Sach für sich on Torah mitzvah. It cannot remain an independent item by itself without Torah mitzvahs. Nor sie muss zubringen, but that must lead you to Kima Torah mitzvahs, to observing Torah mitzvahs. Und durch them, and through that, wird nisgala euch meiles nishmosa b'zizecha from Torah. That way, it also reveals the advantage of your soul that's higher than Torah. Because you are connected to Maila Atzma, eventually you'll have to connect, because the way we connect over here is through the Torah, and therefore eventually you will be connected to Torah, and in your world over here will be revealed the essence of the Maila. From this we have the two extremes. As far as love thy fellow as yourself. Die Atzmius von der Abbe, was nimmt sich mit Zad der Achdus von alle Yidden b'sherish nafshe. The essence of that love, the love that we have because of the unity that all Yidden are one in the root of their soul, wo Yidden seinen Hecher von Torah, where Yidden are high in Torah, is hecher von the medidas von Torah. Oh, that's beyond the measures of Torah. Und der Riber is zu allen Ava zu allen b'shava. Therefore, at that level, which is higher than Torah, the love to every yid is equal. Euch zu b'riyas, also to created being, that are far from the Torah of Hashem in the service. Weil in der Darge kann man nicht mechalek sein zwischen a Tzadik und a Yiden, was ist rochig von Torah. At that level, you can't distinguish, you can't separate between a tzaddik and a yid who is far from Torah. When al derech zeh is Iave Gufa nid bagrenitz, and same thing, that love is therefore now also not limited to the ruchnis from the zweiten Yidden, to the spirituality of the second Yid, of the other Jew. That would apply to all of his matters. Gashmis, also his physicality. Since this is the physicality of a Yid, in that highest level. But from the second perspective, that the existence of a Jew is tied to the Torah, as mentioned earlier, then also that love of the fellow Yid, also that higher level of love, which is in Torah, becomes a mitzvah in Torah. That becomes now a mitzvah in the Torah. You have to love another Jew, because that's what Torah says, not because he's your brother, just because but Torah says so. But Torah is conveying them. Then you have the limits, the measures, the definitions that Torah sets in it. Kinal, as mentioned earlier. And therefore, you're not allowed to make any compromises because you love that fellow, because now it's become down lamata in halacha. To the extent there's such yidden, God forbid, was Torah zogt. Torah tells us, as the yachas to zayd of zayin and anayfen, that the approach to them should be in a way from tachlis sinas neisa v'koymer, as the pasuk says in Tehillim, with total hatred. I hate them. Yudalef. And this is oich, was Hillel is madgish. This is what Hillel emphasizes. Al derech said that Goshe von Alten Rebbe in Tanya. And similarly, the emphasis in Alten Rebbe in Tanya. As the inyan von oyeves abriyas, loving the fellow, those who are distant from Hashem and their service, that oich firun to makarmim latoyre. It must lead to makarmim latoyre, not just to love. Although the love to them is because of their essence level, that they're Israel, but they're Jewish, they're Yidden. And you must love a Yid, and help him in all his matters. Even when you're not successful and bring him close to Torah. So while you love him, because they're Yidden, and still you have to love them, but still you have to try to become the Torah. Just like by yourself, just as it's for the person himself, as the atzmik is the kamaila from Zayin Ayid, that the essence advantage of being Jewish. Your connection to Hashem, which is higher than Torah, cannot remain separate Torah mitzvahs, nor does Gufa bring them to Kima Torah mitzvahs. But that essence connection brings you that you will fulfill Torah mitzvahs. Likewise, is the love to those who are distant from Hashem's Torah Vedosa. Don't leave them. As taka the farvos and fields because you sense their great essence advantages and Eden, then you're not satisfied with that alone. That itself brings out by him the effort to make them Torah Jews. Because that essential advantage that you have must express itself, must be revealed through Torah. it turns out, as wenn der zweite bleibt rochig from Torah, if you're not going to accomplish and the other person remains far from Torah, kann nicht sein der richtige der Herr. You cannot have the proper sense in dem Sholem beachtus amitis, was is dort zwischen ihm und alle Yidden, the true peace and unity that is between him and all Yidden, as me is achim mamish mitzad sheresh neshmos, that you're actually brothers. You can't sense that because you don't bring it down into the lamato to connect it. Specifically, that you bring close to Torah. You tie them to Torah, and through that, with Hashem, so then you sense openly. You also hear the essence of their advantage, which is higher than Torah. Now the Rebbe goes back to explain the two statements of Rabbi Akiva and Hillel of Klal Godel B'Torah, or this is all of Torah. So now we can understand the explanation, the two languages of our state teaches the blessed memory of B'negei Avos Yisrael as far as love thy fellow. Rabbi Akiva read wegen Klal von Avos Yisrael. Rabbi Akiva talks about the general, the rule of Avos Yisrael. How we need to and how you actually observe this in actuality. But that's with another yid in his matters. How is a soul dressed up in a physical body? Based on the measurings and the limitations of Torah. Und the Rebbe is nicht shaykh zu sagen bei them. So by this you can't say this is kol Torah. This is all of Torah. But if this was all the Torah, then all boundaries of Torah would have got a bit fallen to the wayside. So we love the Jews, so who cares? Who would compromise? Similar, saving someone's life is overrides the Torah. If that was the only mitzvah, then we should sacrifice everything and give up the Torah for it. She's not a klal godel bat Torah, but it's a klal in Torah. A klal in Torah. This must be done according to the definition, the boundaries of Torah. Hillel speaks. He speaks about as it is below in the soul, in the body. However, over b'shayches and b'tzadim shoydish, but he sees its connection and the root from Eden, how it relates to the part that come before Torah. Mitzad der darge, and for that level is ganz Torah nor tzulibit. All of Torah is because of the Yid. Tzarosh bringen megala zayin the mile von Eden, to bring out and to reveal the advantage of Yidden. Bal the mile von Eden, and since the advantage, the greatness of the Yidden, as they are really brothers because of the root of their souls, kum tarosh begilui in the midst of an Avos Yisrael, and it comes out in the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael is Zuhi Kola Torah Kula Vidach Pirusha. This becomes the entire Torah, and the rest is just commentary. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Kedoshim Tovshin Chof Zayin.